The second type of learning that we're going to be investigating is called classical conditioning. And with this, a previously neutral stimulus suddenly attains meaning or becomes a predictor, now a conditioned stimulus, for something after it was paired with something that was inherently meaningful, or an unconditioned stimulus. Now, so this sounds very complicated, and there's lots of different words like conditioned and stimulus and predicting and things like that, but don't make this harder than it needs to be. Essentially what we're doing here is we're just making an association between two unrelated stimuli. And really the association that's being made is an involuntary one. It's a physical or emotional response. So we can see things like excitement or fear responses, changes in blood pressure, heart rate, or salivation. And so this makes sense if we think about Pavlov, who is the prime example of classical conditioning. So he had the dogs in his experiment, and he would give them meat powder, and he was measuring salivation in different contexts. But what ended up happening is that a bell would chime prior to the dogs being presented with the meat powder. And soon he started to see that the dogs started salivating when they heard the bell, even before they had the meat powder presented to them, because the bell had become the predictor for the meat powder being presented. So it kind of screwed up his physiology experiment with the salivation. But we learned a very important concept from a behavior standpoint. With classical conditioning, the learning process actually happens really fast if the two stimuli are always paired together and they never occur not together. So really what happens is this neutral stimulus, this chime, becomes the perfect predictor for the inherently meaningful stimulus, the meat powder. And so if we wanted to apply this to cats, we could say that the cat carrier in and of itself is inherently neutral, and the only time the cat's put in the carrier is to go to the vet, and the vet visit in and of itself is frightening. So now, because the cat carrier only comes out when the vet visit is going to occur, the cat carrier predicts the trip to the vet, and therefore the cat carrier now in and of itself creates a fear response in the cat. Classical conditioning is something that is always occurring. And this is important to remember. It's always occurring whether or not the handler intends it to be. And so this is in our best interest to understand this concept so we can see it happening and maybe can have a little bit of control over what conditioning might be occurring in the situation. And again, the animals don't associate the situation with the experience they had. We already used that office experience. For some of these more intelligent animals, which we all run into when we're in a shelter setting, it only takes one exposure to paired stimulus for the animal to learn. And they say, never again. That was so scary. I am never letting this situation occur. That person in a white coat can never come near me because I got poked with needles. Another thing to remember is that classical conditioning can actually interfere with operant conditioning. So if they're both happening at the same time, classical conditioning can actually trump operant conditioning. And this is going to become important later down the road, excuse me, when we're putting together our behavior modification exercises.